The rand trading around 7.14 against the dollar this morning, and of course last week it did trade down to around 7 rand 5 against the dollar. To take us through some of the drivers that we saw taking the rand down to those very strong levels last week.
Morning, Stephen. Yes, you're right. I mean, the rand had an incredible amount of momentum at the beginning of last week. We think just on some general global sentiment and optimism, but then it seemed to hit a bit of a roadblock in the middle of the week when there were concerns that are following the Bank of Japan's intervention in currency markets. There were concerns that other emerging market central banks would do the same. Then we also had some news that the required level of reserves or capital adequacy for Chinese banks may be tougher than expected, and that led to fears that there might be a slowdown in Chinese growth, and of course that hampered emerging markets and currencies such as the rand particularly. So from about midweek we saw the rand start to sort of lose momentum and drift sideways.
Of course, you could argue at 7.14 the rand is still sitting pretty strong, and of course this as the ANC kicks off its policy conference, and of course the rand's level is going to be one of the topics discussed at that forum.
Yes, absolutely, Stephen. I mean, there have been persistent comments by key figures in government that the rand is too strong at current levels, and it is definitely going to be one of the key topics at the policy conference this week. The Deputy President and Finance Minister were in London last week, and they reiterated that they were looking at various measures to try and tame the rand's appreciation, but they did appear to dismiss the possibility of a Tobin tax. But they did say that they are considering other measures and that an announcement is due shortly.
How do you think this conference is going to be viewed by international investors, and particularly international currency investors? Because apart from the rand's levels, there's also going to be nationalisation under discussion. Do you think this is something they're paying cognizance to?
Oh, absolutely, Stephen. I mean, you know, this is a policy conference. It may take some time for the resolutions decided here to eventually become policy, but it does give investors a sort of key as to what the ruling party is thinking and what future direction policy in South Africa may take. So I think they'll absolutely be looking at very closely at this conference this week. And as you mentioned, issues such as nationalisation are due to be discussed, issues like the rand's appreciation and various other economic policy angles are going to be looked at.
Of course, just going into the week, we have on Wednesday July retail sales coming out, and of course June numbers at 7.4% growth. That really, though, boosted by World Cup spending and everybody rushing out and buying new televisions for that World Cup. Are we looking at a bit of a tapering off on those retail numbers?
No, of course, Stephen. I mean, the growth levels we saw in June related to the World Cup are definitely cannot be sustained by the state that South African consumers are in at the moment. So we are expecting those numbers to have moderated in July and probably will moderate further going forward. So that could weigh on the rand a bit on Wednesday, but there is also the quarterly bulletin out on that day, and we're expecting to see a narrowing in the current account deficit due to the slowing in growth tempo during the quarter. And we think that could then provide a bit of a boost to the rand. So on balance, we think that it will probably strengthen more on the back of current account data than it would weaken on the back of retail sales data.
How about the Federal Open Market Committee meeting tomorrow? How do you think that's going to help drive the currency markets, and what's the potential impact of that on the rand?
Yeah, absolutely a big meeting, Stephen. I mean, we've seen the dollar come under pressure recently because there's been some speculation that the Fed is going to expand its quantitative easing program. We think that the most likely outcome is going to be an unchanged policy stance from the Fed. And if they accompany this with a sort of bullish outlook for the US economy and try and calm investor fears and say that the economy is actually on track to do very well this year, then we think that the related optimism from a statement like that could actually further strengthen the rand this week.